if you so desire. Isaac, you have the floor.
Okay, cool. I wanted to start going all the way back to Ruben's very, very first part. He said false security is a big problem. I think no matter what you believe about salvation, that false security is a big problem, and false converts are a huge problem. We talked a lot about false converts, but I just wanted to take a moment here today to tell you why the problem is so prevalent. I told a number of people that I was going to be on this board, and I said, oh, you can't lose your salvation. And they said, but I know somebody who lost their salvation. I know somebody who was at church camp. I know somebody who was this. I know somebody who had a baby, and their baby died, and now they're no longer a part of the faith. What do I do with that? And these people were counselors, and they would tell people how to read the Bible, and they had all these wonderful fruits in their life, and then they fell away, and they say, what am I supposed to do with all of these teachings that they gave me? What are you to make of that if you can't actually lose your salvation? I'd like to begin with the claim that there are way more false converts than we like to think. There are like way more false converts. And I think that salvation is an interesting topic for sure. But most people agree that it's not just one time, it's not just one, hey, I'm saved. Like most people generally agree that if you say the prayer, you're not saved. That's kind of like a statement that came about in Billy Graham's crusades, and he's like, just say the prayer and you're saved, and then we all kind of reject that claim, generally. But Billy Graham himself didn't think that prayer was all you need. He thought, in an interview with PBS, he said he thinks only about 25% of people who came up to his rallies were actually going to be saved. But if you look at real statistics, it's only about 6% of people who come up at crusades or rallies actually show any difference in their life a year after that. And who knows what kind of difference they show a year or 2 years once the high wears down of this crusade. The problem isn't that people come forward and that they repent and that they're happy about it. I want to read this quote from Charles Spurgeon. He said, though I rejoice in sudden conversions, I entertain grave suspicions of those suddenly happy for those who seem to have never been sorrowed over their sins. I am afraid that those who come by their religion so lightly often lose it quite lightly as well. Saul was converted and in a sudden flash, but no man ever had greater horror or darkness than he did. Personally, I think that we see people gradually come to the faith. I think there is a sudden conversion, and then there's also a gradual sanctification that comes over us, and we become more like Christ as time moves on. And I think we confuse this kind of gradual faith with inauthentic faith, and that's not my goal. But I also think that we confuse this sudden joy springing up in people's life and this sudden spring up with real authentic salvation. Generally, it takes more than just a prayer. And I think why we think this, I'll skip that verse and I'll come back to it. You got to watch out for false converts. False converts are a fruit of false teachers. In Matthew 7, it says, beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep, but they're really vicious wolves. You can identify them by their fruits and by the way they act. Can you pick grapes from a thorn bush or figs from thistles? I was looking at statistics, and they're crazy about the real life that people really lead, that say they're Christians, say they're evangelicals. Now, none of you people, I'm sure, are like this. I'm sure you're all perfect Christians. Otherwise, you would go to Southeastern, the best university in the world. But this is just a little gross to me. 68% of church-going men and over 50% of pastors use sexually explicit material on a regular basis. Young adults are higher for this, but 50% of pastors use sexually explicit material on a regular basis. Now, I honestly don't think that your web history is enough to kick you out of the faith. I think the blood of Jesus is way more powerful than anything you've done in your past. But the problem is this word regular. They regularly view. And so, if we're looking at this, these sexual sins that people do, like, why is it so prevalent? I think that sexual sins are maybe the hardest things to get rid of, but they're also the first things that should go in our lives. When I was in Africa, they had to stop being polygamous. Like, they heard the word of God, and then they all said, we have to stop being polygamous. And you're like, what's that? And, so like this kind of radical shift from the sexually moral church world that we have here. And so if half of our pastors aren't living up to a good standard, what do you think about the congregations? I think a lot of people are led astray by false teachers, and they're really prevalent and really a big problem.
10 seconds.
I'm going to skip all that. I'm just going to read Matthew 13. No, I'm not. I'm not going to read that. I'll just read John, 1 John 2:19. If they went out from us, they didn't really belong to us. For if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. By going out, they made it plain that they didn't belong to us. So I want to end with this idea. Do you think it's more plausible that a person went to a crusade, or their parents brought them to church, and they felt good, and they liked all the attention that they were getting from other people, and they liked all this stuff, and they wanted to hang around with other nice people, and they wanted to be nice, and then they kind of just gave it up? Or do you think that they encountered God, really, truly had an encounter with God, and they gave it all up so that they could go back to sin? What's more plausible?
All right, Trey, you have the opportunity to ask questions of Isaac.
Alright, so a lot of what you said was really depressing.
I know.
But there wasn't much that I disagreed with, and I don't think there was much that we, as a position, would disagree with. You mainly just harped on false converts, which I agree, there are false converts, yeah. So, what do we do with these false converts? What do we do? What if Dr. Davis is a false convert? What do we do with all this teaching? What do we do with all this teaching that he's indoctrinated us with?
Yes, there are secular teachings in the Bible. I'm thinking like the Ten Commandments, or some people say they're based off the Code of Hammurabi. And so it's like there are these ideas that people have, and even in the New Testament, there's ideas that poets and philosophers have that Paul quotes, and they're in the scriptures. Even if they aren't from a God-fearing source, they can be repurposed and reused for the glory of God. And I don't think that anybody would disagree that secular people are here to help with the
That's a good answer.
If you want to ask any question about any one of our panels, we're good.
Sure. I have a question.
All right, so I have a question. It's kind of funny actually because you chose not to read the passage. Matthew 13, starting in verse 3. He says, "And he told them many things in parables, saying, A sower went out to sow, and he sowed some seeds, and the seeds fell among the patch, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and immediately sprang up, and since they had no depth of soil, but when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, and some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear." Now when Jesus goes and he explains this parable, he says in verse 22 of the same chapter, "As for what was sown among thorns, this is one who hears the word, but cares of the world, and the deceitfulness of riches chokes the word, and it proves unfruitful." I would say it's clear. The seed takes hold, it takes root, and it grows. That's what Jesus says. But after it grows, after it takes root, the thorns grow alongside of it, which he says is the deceitfulness of the world, the cares of the world, and it chokes out their faith. That's how Jesus explains this parable. So how would you account for that in your view of our false converts?
Yeah, I would love to talk about that because I had a whole point on it, which is, I'm so glad you brought it up. There are two main ideas we can learn from the story. There's the seed that fell on the rocky soil, and they spring up and they immediately hear it with joy, and then they wither away when times are hard. And we learn from these plants that, and it may seem contradictory, you're right, but where the word is preached, I think it brings life. Where Jesus is preached, it always brings life. Everywhere it goes, I think that's a byproduct of Jesus, is life, springing forth life. However, the plants that wither up and die, they don't have fruit. And they wither up, and they crumple up, and they shrivel away, and actually, they're worse off now that they've sprung up than they were before. Because before, when they're seeds, you can eat them. You can just eat the seeds. But now you can't do anything with them because they shriveled up and died. They're choked out by the world because they've sprung up and they didn't produce any fruit. So I think when you see fruit being produced, that would show a real true convert. And I think that's what Jesus is saying too. Like there are people who look like they're springing up, but they're not. Wait till they're full grown and they have their roots.
How do you know that you're not a false convert?
I would say honestly that a lot of people can be deceived, and I would be silly to think I couldn't be deceived. I think the people who hunger and thirst for righteousness are the ones who receive salvation, and whether or not they do good works or they don't, if they're hungry and thirsty and they want and they pursue and they really, really want, I think God is gracious and He'll forgive them. And so, I don't know if I'm a false convert, but I know I'm going to trust in Jesus, and Jesus is going to take me all the way through.
I just have one question. So you talk about the roots, right? You have to wait till the end until it's fully grown. So then that's how you know, right? Correct?
Sure. Yeah.
So what if that person dies while it's still growing? Are they going to heaven?
That's a great question. I think, if they have their little flowers, God will know. God knows. Like, if there's a good growing up plant, a farmer knows when he tears it out. He knows if it's going to be a good plant or not. And he's like, maybe he just has to make room for other things. Maybe he's got a different plan. Maybe he has to put a new path through there. And he's got to take out this old plant. But he's like, I know that this plant is going to be good. I know it's going to flourish. God's smarter than
Ladies and gentlemen, we do have time. We've come to the end of the panel discussion, but I have some notes here. It's like, Dr. Davis, if you are able to actually keep this on schedule, which we highly doubt. They don't actually say that, I'm joking. We have time for 10 minutes of questions. And so we can take questions and you may address them to whoever you will on the panel. And so right here is our first question. Okay, the mic is coming to you.
Or should we have people line up? It's up to you. All right, actually, if you have a question, let's have a line going right here. Just go ahead. I think that'll be better than me running around. And we can go quicker that way.